My best friend Betty died in a traffic accident. When I was about to go to her funeral, "Don't you dare come," my friend Rosie told me. I couldn't understand why I shouldn't attend Betty's last farewell, so I went to the funeral anyway. There, I witnessed an incomprehensible scene. Undoubtedly, it was my husband Kenneth, sitting in the seat reserved for the family. And he was with a boy about 2 years old. What's going on? In a state of panic, I instantly grasped the situation. Silently, I offered flowers and glared at Kenneth in the family seat. Kenneth turned pale. My name is Marley. I'm 38 years old, living with my same-aged husband Kenneth, our 13-year-old daughter Shirley, and our 10-year-old daughter Sandra. Our family relationship is excellent. We live harmoniously without major conflicts. Kenneth had been on a work assignment alone for the past 3 years. He adores our daughters, always wanting to talk to them whenever he calls. However, Shirley is in her rebellious phase and doesn't want to talk to him, which makes him feel lonely and complain. Sandra, on the other hand, is fond of Kenneth, which seems to be a relief. One day, I got a call from Rosie. "What? Betty's dead? You're kidding. She died instantly in a traffic accident. I can't believe it either. Betty had been my best friend since 10th grade. She was very cute and was popular with the opposite sex since high school. Knowing this, she used to change boyfriends frequently. Her only flaw was her messy relationships with men, but that was only until she was single. Now she's a mother and doing a great job. I couldn't accept the situation. Just last week she'd called me, happily sharing that her son had turned 2. And he started running. "Hello, Marley? Are you okay?" "Sorry, so where's the funeral?" It turned out to be near Kenneth's place of assignment. Perfect. I decided to stay at Kenneth's condo for a while and observe. I hung up with Rosie and called Kenneth. "Hello? Is something wrong?" Maybe it's just me, but Kenneth sounded down. "You sound low. Are you okay? Feeling sick?" "No, just tired from work." "What's up?" "Do you remember my friend Betty? I introduced you to her at our wedding." "What? Yeah, I remember her." I had deliberately not introduced Kenneth to Betty until just before. I knew too well how popular Betty was with men, having known her for so long. Even if Betty wasn't interested, men would fall for her. That's how captivating she was to men. "That Betty died in a traffic accident. The funeral is near where you're living now, so I'm thinking of going there." "Eh? No, it's going to be tough, right?" "I'll go to the funeral, so it's okay. If you come here, what about the girls?" "It's just for 2 or 3 days. It'll be fine. I'm planning to ask Lynn to take care of them." "No, don't bother Mom with this. Anyway, I'll go to the funeral, so you absolutely must not come here. Understand?" With that, Kenneth unilaterally ended the call. Something's off. Kenneth's attitude is unnatural, and it's too strange for Kenneth, who hardly knows her, to attend my best friend's funeral. Ignoring Kenneth's words, I decided to entrust my kids to my mother-in-law, Lynn, and go to the funeral. Fortunately, I have a good relationship with my in-laws, so I quickly got their approval. During the trip, I received a call from Rosie, who informed me of Betty's death the other day. "Hello? Hello, Marley? Are you by any chance going to Betty's funeral?" I could tell from the phone that Rosie was crying. "Yeah, Kenneth tried to stop me, but it's the last farewell. I definitely want to go." "Don't come. It'll be a disaster. Go back immediately." "Eh? What's wrong all of a sudden? What do you mean by a disaster?" "I don't know the details, but just don't come. It's better not to." With that, Rosie hung up. What's with Kenneth and Rosie all of a sudden? Will something happen if I attend the funeral? But it's too late to turn back now. I'm already on the plane. And when I arrived at the funeral, I was stunned by the sight. There was Kenneth. Well, that's okay. He said he would attend over the phone. Kenneth was sitting in the family representative seat with a boy of about 2 years old, greeting the attendees. What does this mean? Did Kenneth and Betty know each other? Family representative. Does that mean Kenneth and Betty were family? Parents and child. That's impossible. So, siblings? Or could they possibly be husband and wife? Questions kept coming and my mind was almost in a panic. Marley, you came. I told you not to. What's going on? I didn't understand either when I saw Marley's husband in the family representative seat, so I pretended we hadn't met and struck up a conversation. Rosie had attended our wedding, but with so many people there, it was unlikely Kenneth remembered Rosie's face. And sure enough, he didn't remember my face. He said, "Nice to meet you. I'm Betty's husband. Thank you for coming despite your busy schedule." Betty's husband? Kenneth is my husband. And Betty's too? We've been married for 3 years, he said. That 2-year-old boy over there seems to be Kenneth and Betty's child. 3 years ago. That's also when Kenneth started his work assignment. I finally started to put things together. Simply put, Kenneth had an affair where he was stationed and fathered a child. That's all there is to it. I said you shouldn't come, but that's a strange thing to say too. You have the right to know what's happening, Marley. Thanks for being considerate. I still don't understand everything, but at least it's better than being completely in the dark. I quickly proceeded to the body and lined up to offer flowers. Kenneth, head bowed, was nodding to each person offering flowers. Up close, his eyes were swollen, probably from crying a lot. Then it was my turn. Kenneth looked up at me and turned pale, as if he'd seen a ghost. What is Kenneth thinking now? Is he angry that I came to the funeral despite his warnings, panicked about how to explain his affair, or something else? I offered my flowers and left without a word. This was my declaration of war. The battle with Kenneth was about to begin. I'll make sure he regrets this. More than a ghost. It's like death. Good. Let Kenneth suffer. I got back on a plane and rushed home. There were several missed calls on my phone, but I turned it off midway. First, I went to the civil office to check my marital status. The marriage was still valid. It made even less sense, but I reported the situation to my in-laws. I told them that at Betty's funeral, Kenneth was the family representative, apparently married for 3 years, and there was a 2-year-old boy. Laying out the facts had a devastating impact. My in-laws were initially stunned, thinking I was joking. But knowing our usually good relationship, they realized I wasn't lying and became furious. They tried to contact Kenneth, but couldn't reach him. If he's really the family representative, he's probably still busy. Or maybe he's running away, not knowing what to do. Next, I decided to call Betty's parents. I had been close friends with Betty since high school and knew her parents. I even learned how to bake cakes from Betty's mom. I didn't know how much Betty's parents knew, but the fact that they had just lost their precious daughter was undeniable, and I felt guilty for involving them while their grief was still fresh. However, it was also strange for me to be overly considerate. They might have been deceived without knowing anything. Marley, it's been a while. You came to Betty's funeral, didn't you? I was in such a panic then. I couldn't even greet properly. Thank you for making time to come. She must be happy too. Despite feeling a pang in my heart, I quickly broached the main subject. Actually, I called today to talk about Kenneth, Betty's husband. It's hard to say, but Kenneth is my husband. Was he originally married to Marley and then divorced, becoming Betty's husband? No, that's not it. He is still my husband. We are a married couple and have an official marriage certificate. So I doubt Betty knew about this, but what do you think? Indeed, Kenneth stubbornly said there's no need to file a marriage certificate. We opposed it, but we thought it was their decision. He insisted because of this background. Deceiving Betty like this, it's unforgivable. Betty's mom believed without a doubt that Betty had been deceived. However, I had my doubts about that, especially since Betty and I had been in contact just the other day. I can't forgive being deceived for so long either, but I've been unable to reach him no matter how much I try. Leave it to me. Now that it's come to this, we'll take responsibility and bring Kenneth to a meeting. With this, I successfully rallied support, and the day of the meeting arrived. Present were myself, Kenneth, Kenneth's parents, and Betty's parents. 6 people in total. Despite appearances suggesting I was surrounded by foes, in reality they were all on my side, except for Kenneth. Kenneth looked gaunt and haggard, worse than at the funeral. Of course, he must have been sad then, being seen as the husband who lost his beloved wife and receiving many kind words. All attendees sympathized with him, thinking it tragic for someone so young. But now, he was the man caught in an affair. Everyone present was an enemy. Tense as a frog under a snake's glare, Kenneth began to speak. I met Betty at Marley's and my wedding. I fell for her cuteness at first sight. So they did meet at the wedding. I had suspected as much since there was no other point of contact. But to fall for someone after just one meeting, Betty truly had a way with men. Even after our marriage, we often continued our relationship. It was like a casual, momentary romance, you know? A casual romance with his wife's best friend. Didn't he ever think it would end in disaster? 3 years ago, when I was about to start my solo assignment, I told her it was over. Then Betty said she'd come with me. I was surprised by these words. I thought Betty would have other men besides Kenneth, but moving meant she would be cutting off those relationships. Not that I should be the one to say it, but Kenneth works at a major company, making him a good catch as a husband. It's not surprising that Betty wouldn't want to let go, and I thought Betty would easily find men in a new place. So after I moved for my assignment, Marley wasn't around and we ended up living together. Then we had a child. It was troublesome, but I was happy because it was a boy. Kenneth and I have 2 daughters, and I remember him always wanting a son. Kenneth, speaking excitedly, became awkward under our cold gazes. Betty said that once we had a boy, we would get married. I didn't know Kenneth was already married. But did you actually say that to Betty? Yeah, well, I did say something like, if it's a boy, I'll divorce Marley and marry Betty, but I never thought it would actually happen. It seemed like a game to Betty, something light which led to this situation. If she didn't want to have a child, she should have taken proper precautions. Well, I thought it wasn't right to continue this relationship, but it was hard to choose when asked, and while I was struggling with this, Betty died in a traffic accident. Kenneth finished speaking. I knew it, but hearing it from Kenneth's mouth was a shock. I had been betrayed by him and Betty all this time. Then father-in-law Brian stood up. This foolish man! And punched Kenneth. Mother-in-law Lynn was crying the whole time. Everyone, I'm terribly sorry for what my foolish son has done. I don't know how to apologize enough. Brian deeply apologized. I'll make amends for the rest of my life. So Marley, I want you to adopt the boy and raise him together. Betty would want that from heaven. No, that's impossible. I refused Kenneth's request. Adopt the child of a woman he cheated with just because she died? It was absurd. Hearing this, Brian hit Kenneth again, and Lynn cried out loud. I wanted to cry. The only things I ask of Kenneth are 2. To divorce and to pay compensation. That's all. But there's something I've been wondering. Is this 2-year-old boy really Kenneth's child? The boy doesn't resemble Kenneth at all. It would be typical for Betty. I thought the same. It's embarrassing, but Betty was careless with men, so it's a natural question. Kenneth was speechless. In his mind, he probably imagined me agreeing to adopt the boy, thinking we'd overcome everything and move forward together. But the reality is divorce and compensation, and the possibility that that boy isn't his child. It's no wonder he wants to escape reality. Anyway, please fill in the divorce papers and leave the house as soon as possible. The amount of compensation will be discussed with my lawyer, and I'll inform you later. Wait, please wait. There must be a way we can make this work. The girls will be sad if I suddenly disappear. Brian hit Kenneth again as he pleaded pathetically. I thought you'd say that. So I've already talked to the girls. I even have messages from them. First from Shirley. Cheating is the lowest thing. You're a beast. I never want to see your face again. Next from Sandra. Dad, that's called two-timing, and it's something you shouldn't do. I hate a dad who does that. That's all. Kenneth looked devastated, probably shocked by his daughter's words. You brought this upon yourself. It's your fault for not foreseeing this future. Marley, I'll make sure he pays the compensation. It's the least I can do. A few days later, Kenneth and I divorced. DNA testing was done on the boy, and as expected, Kenneth was not the father. Who the real father is now unknown. The boy was most likely the result of one of Betty's many adult relationships. Betty's parents decided to raise the boy. Since Kenneth had acknowledged him, he was obliged to pay child support. Kenneth now had to pay child support for 2 daughters and the boy, plus compensation, leading him to take on debt. Kenneth's parents disowned him and told him never to enter their house again. Kenneth, once expected to have a brilliant career, lost his chance for advancement when his company became aware of the scandal. Shunned by colleagues and unable to leave because of his debts, he had no place in the company. Betty's parents offered to pay me compensation. I refused, saying their obligation ended with Betty's passing. But they insisted it was the right thing to do, so I accepted. If I hadn't attended the funeral, my life would have continued as it was. There might have been some truth to Rosie's notion of ignorant bliss, but I'm glad to know the truth. I feel more determined than ever to support and live for my daughters. By the way, the messages I said were from the girls were made up by me. The truth about Kenneth's actions would be too shocking for girls their